My name is Amy Carrillo. I'm 41 years old, and my little sister once stole my fiance right out from under me, with my mother's blessing. People hear that and expect screaming matches, smashed plates, some explosive movie scene. The reality was quieter than that. It was a smile, an engagement banner, and a sentence that still echoes in my head. You're too plain for a man like him, Amy. Someone like me makes sense next to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how bad it got, you have to understand where it started. Olivia is 6 years younger than me, and from the moment she could walk, she treated life like a spotlight she was born to stand in. At every family gathering, she floated into the room as if there were cameras rolling, hair perfect, outfit coordinated, lips glossed. I was not that. I was the kid in the corner with a library book and a half-finished sketch, wearing the same jeans I'd had for 3 years. Mom used to laugh and say, "Olivia, you're my little movie star. Amy, you're my little professor." It sounded affectionate, but there was always a line between us that I could feel even as a child. One of us was for show, one of us was for work. By middle school, the gap had turned into a canyon. Olivia had an audience everywhere she went. Boys, girls, teachers, neighbors. She knew exactly how to tilt her head so her hair fell over one shoulder, how to laugh just a little too loudly, how to complain about her flaws so people rushed to tell her how perfect she was. Me. I learned where the quietest tables in the cafeteria were. I learned that if I walked fast and kept my head down, people forgot I existed. That suited me fine. "You could at least try," she'd say, watching me tie my hair into a frizzy bun. "You have such a plain canvas, Amy. No style at all. It's kind of sad." Mom would never correct her. She'd just sigh and tell me, "You know your sister, she's brutally honest. Don't take it to heart." Of course I took it to heart. That's what hearts do. When I left home for high school in another town, I felt like I could breathe for the first time. By the time I got into medical school, I was used to structuring my life around schedules, study groups, and on-call shifts instead of Olivia's dramatics. I visited home only on holidays or short breaks, always keeping my trips brief. The less I saw of her, the less she could hurt me. It worked, for a while. In my first year of med school, I met Dr. Ethan Smith. Back then, he was just Ethan, a senior and part-time duty doctor, tall and lean, with soft blue eyes and a calm voice that could make even the circulatory system sound romantic. He ran extra lessons for freshmen who were drowning in anatomy and physiology. The lecture hall was always packed, especially with girls. "Of course they're all here," my roommate whispered the first time we went. "He looks like a TV doctor." She wasn't wrong. Ethan had that easy confidence that made you feel like he'd seen 100 emergencies and nothing surprised him anymore. But he was also kind. When I stayed back after class one day to ask about a concept I'd messed up, he didn't rush me. He pulled up a chair and drew the whole thing out on a scrap piece of paper, his handwriting looping and precise. "You're overcomplicating it," he said gently. "You're clearly smart. Just trust what you already know." I wanted to roll my eyes and say, "You don't even know me." Instead, I blushed and said, "Thanks, Dr. Smith." "It's Ethan," he corrected with a small smile. One study session turned into three. Three turned into weekly coffee, just to check how you're doing. By the end of my second year, we were officially dating. He was the first man I ever loved, the first man I ever slept with, the first man my mother was actually excited about. When he proposed, it wasn't some dramatic scene. We were in his tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and laundry. He cooked pasta that was slightly oversalted, and after dinner, he took out a small velvet box from his desk drawer. "I know your life is complicated right now," he said, "but the one thing I'm sure of is you. Marry me, Amy." I cried. I said yes. It felt simple, solid, like the first thing in my life that wasn't conditional. That winter, I went home for the holidays. Mom saw the ring as soon as I took my coat off. "What is that?" she gasped, grabbing my hand. "Amy, is this—" "It's exactly what you think," I said, laughing. My voice shook. "His name's Ethan. He's a cardiologist, or, well, almost." Mom screamed so loudly the neighbor's dog started barking. "My daughter is marrying a heart specialist," she yelled, as if she'd already printed the invitations. Olivia appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee like she was in some ad. Her eyes went straight to the ring. "No way," she said. "You're engaged?" There was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Shock? Disbelief? Insult? "Yeah," I said, forcing myself to hold her gaze. "We've been together 4 years." Her lips curved up, but her eyes didn't. "To a doctor?" she asked. "Is he At least cute. Mom smacked her arm. He's a specialist, Olivia. Have some respect. Relax, I'm just asking, Olivia said, flicking her hair over her shoulder. It's just, I never imagined someone like you with someone like that. Someone like me. Someone like that. I swallowed. Mom insisted we invite him over for New Year's Eve dinner. Later, I found out it had been Olivia's idea. Ethan and I didn't have plans that night, so he agreed. As we parked outside my childhood home, I remember feeling oddly light. Maybe this is it, I thought. Proof that I can have something good too. Olivia opened the door before we rang the bell. That was the first red flag. She never stayed home on New Year's. She was always at some party, posting photos with champagne and glitter. You must be Ethan, she said, leaning on the doorframe. She looked him up and down, slowly, like she was appraising a sports car. Wow, Amy, you didn't tell me he was this handsome. Her voice had that sugary tone I'd heard her use on waiters, bouncers, teachers, anyone she wanted something from. Ethan chuckled awkwardly. Nice to meet you, Olivia. All through dinner, Olivia turned the dial up. She laughed at every mildly funny thing he said. She touched his forearm when she leaned over to pass the salad. When we sat down, she slid into the seat beside him with a dramatic little sigh. You get to sit next to him every day, she told me, pouting. Let me be his arm candy tonight. Everyone at the table laughed. I forced myself to smile, telling myself I was being paranoid. She's just being Olivia, I told myself as she asked him about his workouts, his favorite movies, his plans for the future. She flirts with everyone. It doesn't mean anything. When Ethan mentioned that he liked to take a walk after dinner to digest, Olivia's eyes lit up. Oh, you have to let me show you the neighborhood, she said. It's way more interesting than it looks. She was already standing up before I could answer. Ethan looked at me, uncertain. Go if you want, I said, my voice coming out flatter than I intended. I'm going to help Mom with dishes. They left together. I told myself I was being mature, non-jealous, secure. The knot in my stomach disagreed. Months later, when Ethan started pulling away, I would replay that night over and over, looking for the exact moment the ground shifted. During my final exams, his texts got shorter. Our calls went from an hour to 10 minutes. You're just stressed, he said when I asked about it. Focus on your finals. We'll celebrate after. On the last day of exams, I asked him to pick me up. Can't, he said. I'm slammed tonight. Later that night, when I called, he said he was already in bed at home, exhausted. On a stupid impulse, I decided to surprise him with takeout. His apartment lights were off. No car in the driveway. My call went to voicemail. The next day, he admitted he'd stayed at a colleague's place. It just slipped my mind, he said. It didn't make sense, but I was too tired to fight. I let it go. A week later, with no warning, I asked him directly, Ethan, do you still want to marry me? There was a long, brutal silence on the line. I don't think I love you anymore, he said finally. I'm sorry, Amy. That was it. No explanation, no closure, just the sound of something cracking inside my chest. It took months to stop crying myself to sleep, but eventually I did what I've always done. I buried myself in work, in rounds, in charts. I passed my exams. I graduated. I told myself at least he'd waited until after finals to break my heart. 7 months later, my phone lit up with Olivia's name. I stared at it so long it went to missed call. She rang again. Hi, stranger, she chirped when I finally answered. Guess what? I'm getting engaged. You have to come. My stomach flipped. That's fast, I managed. Who's the guy? You'll meet him at the party, she said. Just be happy for me, okay? A part of me hurt. This should have been my season for wedding plans, not breakup hangovers. But I told myself I could show up for my sister for one night. The night of the engagement, I walked into the venue, smoothed my dress, and looked up at the welcome board. Olivia and Ethan Smith. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Smith is a common name, I told myself. It could be another Ethan. It has to be another Ethan. Then I saw him. Ethan. On the stage. Arm wrapped around Olivia, who was glowing like a bride in a magazine, soaking in the attention. The world narrowed to a tunnel. My ears rang. Mom grabbed my wrist and dragged me to a corner before I could say a word. Don't make a scene, she hissed. No one here knows your history. Let your sister be happy. Be happy? My voice cracked. You knew this was Ethan. Her jaw tightened. He chose her, she said. What did you expect? You're so plain, Amy. Olivia and Ethan make sense. Behind her, Olivia glided over in her white dress, smiling like a cat with feathers in its mouth. Oh, you came, she said, feigning surprise. I almost didn't believe you'd have the guts. I stared at her, at him, at the ring on her finger that should have been mine. You really thought you could keep a man like him? She whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. Handsome, rich, charming, next to you? People would have laughed. Look at us, Amy. We're perfect together. For a brief, wild moment, I wanted to slap her so hard her earrings flew. My hand even twitched. Mom's fingers dug into my arm. Don't you dare ruin this, she snapped. Have some self-respect and leave. Self-respect. I don't remember leaving the venue. I just remember the cold air hitting my face, my heels stumbling on the pavement, my vision blurred with tears. That night, I made a decision. They would never get another chance to humiliate me. I cut them all off. Olivia, my mother, Ethan, deleted their numbers, blocked everything. It was the most painful, traumatic moment of my life. I had no idea that 15 years later, they'd come knocking again, this time begging me to save the very man who'd helped destroy me. I always thought cutting off your family would feel dramatic. It didn't. It felt like deleting numbers I'd memorized since childhood, like ignoring holidays, like letting my birthday pass without a single message from them and feeling relief instead of pain. After Olivia's engagement stunt, I rebuilt myself the only way I knew how, by drowning in work. Residency swallowed me whole. 12-hour shifts blurred into 15. I slept in call rooms so often the nurses joked they should assign me one permanently. In a strange way, medicine saved me. When you're focused on keeping people alive, you don't have much energy left to replay the moment your sister told you you were too plain to deserve the man you loved. I kept my life small. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. And slowly, very slowly, the ache faded. Not because I forgave anything, but because exhaustion was stronger than heartbreak. Years passed. My career stabilized. I transferred into one of the largest hospital chains in the region. I made friends. I laughed again. And Olivia, Mom, and Ethan remained exactly where they belonged, in the past. I wasn't looking for anyone new. I wasn't looking for anything at all. But then I met Daniel Ward. He didn't sweep into my life with fireworks or charm. He walked quietly into a staff meeting wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a laptop plastered with sticky notes. The board introduced him as one of the new directors. He wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't try to impress anyone. But he had this presence. Calm, steady. The kind of man who could sit in silence without making it awkward. We ran into each other constantly. Hallways, cafeteria, elevators. At first it was polite nods, then small talk, then full conversations. Never rushed, never forced. One afternoon, after a brutal code blue, he found me in the break room, staring at a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. Tough day? He asked gently. I looked up, startled. Is it that obvious? He sat across from me, not too close, not too far. You carry it in your shoulders, he said. Most good doctors do. Something about the way he said it unclenched a part of me I didn't know was still tight. We talked, then talked again, then again, and little by little I realized I didn't feel afraid with him. Not the way I had with Ethan, where every day felt like balancing on a tightrope over a pit I couldn't see. Daniel wasn't a whirlwind, he was a lighthouse. We dated for years, steadily, kindly, quietly. He never made me feel like I had to compete, prove myself, or fight for space in his world. I didn't even realize how much tension I was carrying until it melted away around him. We married in a small ceremony with no theatrics. Just vows, simple rings, and a calm kind of happiness I didn't know existed. My side of the aisle was empty, and honestly, that felt like peace. We had 2 children, built a home, built a life I protected fiercely from the chaos I came from. For 15 years, not a single call from Olivia or Mom, not a single message, not a birthday, nothing. And I thought it would stay that way forever. Then one morning, I stepped out of a patient consult and saw a missed call from an unknown number. Normally I ignore those, but something, intuition or fate, made me pick up when it rang again. Hello? I answered. There was a pause, a breath, and then, Amy, hi, it's me. I felt everything inside me go still. Olivia, I finally said. Yeah, hi. Her voice was too bright, too fake. How are you? How's life? I heard you have kids. That's amazing. I didn't respond. Olivia rushed on. Listen, I actually need your help. There it was. The real reason. The only reason she would ever call me. It's Ethan. My stomach dropped as if I were falling through a trapdoor. She took a shaky breath. He's in trouble at work, a post-surgery allergic reaction. They're talking about firing him, maybe even suspending his license. And, well, your husband is on the board, so maybe he could... No, I said. You didn't even hear me out. I don't need to. My voice was ice. She swallowed. Amy, please, he's my husband. I hung up without another word. I know I should have left it there. But that night, after my shift, I logged into the hospital system. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I typed his name, Ethan Smith. His profile appeared instantly. His photo looked older, more tired, but unmistakably him. The word next to his name? Suspended. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Not joy, not revenge, something colder, something like destiny catching up. I didn't tell Daniel, not yet. I didn't want to open a wound I'd stitched shut years ago. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, someone knocked on our front door. Daniel answered, and standing on the porch, as if summoned by a nightmare I thought I'd outgrown, was my mother. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like seeing a ghost. Amy, she whispered, her eyes filling dramatically. Oh, sweetheart, look at you. Daniel stepped beside me protectively. Can we help you? She wrung her hands, dropped the teary act, and blurted, Please help Ethan. He's family. They might revoke his license. Olivia's falling apart. You have to make Daniel fix this, please, Amy. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. I don't fix cases, he said calmly, especially not ones involving patient harm. My mother blinked, stunned. Then she turned to me. You're really going to let this happen? She whispered. After everything? Images flashed. Olivia's smirk. My mother dragging me out of that engagement. Her calling me plain. Yes, I said quietly. I am. She shook her head, muttered something under her breath, and walked away without looking back. The moment the door shut, Daniel turned to me. Are you okay? For the first time in years, the past cracked open inside me. I don't know, I whispered. And I didn't. Daniel didn't push after that. He didn't press for explanations or force me to talk about things I wasn't ready to revisit. He just stayed close. Close enough that I could feel his steadiness, but not so close that I felt cornered. I didn't realize until then how much gentleness mattered. But the quiet didn't last. 2 days later, during a late-night shift, Daniel came into my office. He had that look, controlled but heavy, like he was holding information he didn't want to deliver. Amy, he said softly, closing the door behind him, the board reached a decision. I froze. About Ethan, I asked? He nodded. He's being terminated effective immediately, and because the negligence case is severe, his file is being forwarded to the state healthcare board. That means an external investigation. Potential license revocation. I felt something twist in my stomach. Not triumph, not sadness. Something complicated. Something like closure trying to take shape. What do you want me to do with that information? Daniel asked quietly. The question wasn't about Ethan, it was about me. I inhaled slowly. Nothing. Handle it like you would handle anyone else. He searched my face for a moment, then nodded and left it at that. I thought the nightmare might finally be over. But I underestimated Olivia and my mother. They couldn't accept consequences, not for themselves, not for Ethan, and certainly not for the man they'd chosen over me. By the weekend, my phone buzzed nonstop, not from calls, but from tags. Dozens of them. I hadn't used Facebook in years, but my old account was still public, and now my notifications were exploding. I logged in. At first, the words didn't register. Then they did. Olivia had posted a long, dramatic rant calling me a jealous, vindictive witch. My mother had commented, agreeing with every word. Cousins, aunts, distant relatives, they all piled in. Amy never got over Ethan. She's obsessed. She's using her husband's power to destroy him. She was always bitter and plain. Plain. There it was again. That old word that cut deeper than it should have. Ethan himself had a comment buried in one of the threads. I never loved Amy. She's delusional. I married the woman I always wanted. My hands shook. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment, all the years I'd spent rebuilding myself collapsed inward, like someone had punched the breath out of me. Daniel found me staring at the screen, completely silent. Amy, he said softly, stepping behind me. Look at me. I turned. He cupped my jaw gently, grounding me. Don't let them rewrite what happened, he said. Not in your mind. Not in your life. I nodded, but something inside me had already snapped. The part of me that had been quiet for 15 years, the part that knew how Olivia's cruelty felt, how Mom's favoritism burned, how Ethan's betrayal shattered me, woke up. And I realized something important. They didn't want mercy. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted a villain. Fine. I wouldn't be their doormat anymore. Daniel, I said, my voice steady, don't spare him. He raised an eyebrow. I wasn't planning to, but hearing you say it feels different. I exhaled. Good. But life wasn't done throwing curveballs. 3 days later, I was in my clinic room between appointments when the nurse knocked. Dr. Carrillo, your next patient is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he insisted on being seen. I grabbed the chart the nurse handed me. No name listed. Just walk in. Flu symptoms. I pushed the door open and felt the world tilt. Ethan Smith sat on the exam table. He smiled weakly. Hi, Amy. Every muscle in my body tensed. Get out. I paid the fee, he said quickly, raising his hands. You're required to treat me. He was right. Legally, I couldn't kick him out, and he knew it. I walked in slowly, my spine stiff. Without breaking eye contact, I tapped my phone on, hit record, and slid it face down onto the counter. What are your symptoms? I asked coolly. He listed a few fake ones. Fever, cough, body aches. None of his vitals reflected it. His pulse was too steady, his breathing too calm. He wasn't sick, he was desperate. I prescribed standard medication, typed up the visit notes, and stood to leave. But he didn't move. Amy, wait, please. I turned reluctantly. I'm sorry, he blurted, for everything. I wanted to apologize for years. I stared at him. He continued, words tumbling over themselves. Your sister, she tricked me. She threatened me. She made me sleep with her. She said she'd accuse me of assault if I didn't leave you. I let him speak, not because I believed him, but because every lie he told was being recorded. And I know, he said breathlessly, I know you still have feelings for me. That's why this hurts you so much. I laughed, actually laughed. His face fell. He pressed on anyway. If you can convince your husband to stop the board from revoking my license, I'll leave Olivia, I swear. You don't have to leave Daniel, but we could have our own thing, in secret. My jaw dropped. He thought I'd want him? He thought I'd cheat? He thought I'd throw away my life for him? You're delusional, I said coldly, and this conversation is over. I opened the door. Security will escort you out. His confidence cracked. Panic flickered across his face. Amy, please! I walked out. As security led him away, I texted Olivia. Your husband just came to my clinic pretending to be a patient. He tried to flirt. He begged me to help him avoid prison. Thought you should know. She replied instantly. I know, he tells me everything. If you help him, you can sleep with him for a night. I don't care. Just save his license. I stared at her message for a long, stunned moment. Then something inside me went calm, quiet, sharp. I knew exactly what I would do next. I don't know how long I stood there staring at Olivia's message. The words didn't feel real, almost like my brain refused to process the level of depravity it was reading. She was offering me her husband for a night. The same husband she stole. The same husband she flaunted in front of me. The same man she'd sworn was her perfect match. All so I would help cover up his negligence. It was so absurd my first reaction wasn't even anger. It was a hollow, disbelieving laugh. A laugh that sounded nothing like joy and everything like surrender. Not the surrender of giving up. The surrender of letting the truth finally speak for itself. I walked into the living room where Daniel was reading a report. He looked up immediately when he saw my face. Amy, he asked, standing. I held up my phone, hand trembling. You need to hear this. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room like poison seeping under the door. Amy, I know you still love me. If you can convince your husband to save me, I'll be your lover. You don't have to leave him. Daniel's jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard something crack. But he didn't interrupt. He didn't explode. He didn't yell. He listened. Then I showed him Olivia's messages. He exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled sound. Amy, he said quietly, if you wanted to press charges just for this, I would support you. I know, I said, but I don't need court. I need truth. He studied me for a long moment. What are you planning? I didn't answer, not out loud, but Daniel saw enough in my eyes to know I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened Facebook. I found Olivia's profile, my mother's, Ethan's, several relatives who still had me listed as Amy C. I clicked Add Friend. Every one of them accepted immediately. To them, this was a sign, a crack in the door, a chance to push their narrative. They didn't know it was actually an invitation to witness the consequences of their own cruelty. I wrote a post. Not angry, not spiteful, just honest. I wrote about the night Olivia stole Ethan. How Mom told me I was too plain. How they humiliated me in front of a crowd. How I left in tears and built an entire life without them. How I hadn't spoken to them in 15 years. I wrote about the recent phone calls, the manipulation, the begging, the entitlement. And then I attached the screenshots, Olivia offering Ethan like he was a bargaining chip, Ethan begging me to be his secret lover. At the end, I uploaded the audio recording, a still image of Ethan's face with the entire conversation playing like a soundtrack of his own downfall. I stared at the post button for a full minute. Then I tapped it. Within seconds, notifications exploded. Within minutes, the comments poured in. Shock, disgust, outrage, support. Extended relatives who once sided with Olivia swiftly flipped. One wrote, "I always wondered why Amy disappeared. This explains everything." Another said, "Olivia, this is sick. You owe the world an apology, not just your sister." I blocked Olivia, Mom, and Ethan before they could respond. My post wasn't for them. It was for the truth. For the girl I used to be. For the woman I became without them. For the closure I was finally earning. Daniel sat beside me, reading silently. Then he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You didn't do this for revenge," he murmured. "You did this for yourself." "I did," I whispered. And for the first time, the admission didn't feel shameful. It felt freeing. The next few days were chaotic. Olivia tried contacting me through new numbers. Mom left tearful voicemails begging me to stop destroying the family. I deleted everything without listening. Meanwhile, the state healthcare board officially began its investigation into Ethan. It wasn't personal, it wasn't revenge, it was protocol. But the truth is, he deserved every second of what was coming. I spent the weekend reading comments under my posts like they were chapters of a story I'd finally written the ending to. People defended me. People called Olivia a monster. People dragged Ethan for filth. It was cathartic in a way I never expected. Sunday afternoon, Daniel walked into the living room holding his phone. "They've scheduled Ethan's hearing," he said. "If the state confirms the negligence report, he'll lose his license." I nodded slowly. "Good. And there's more," Daniel added. "There's a possibility of criminal charges." I inhaled deeply. I don't want to influence anything. Whatever happens, let it happen because of what he did, not because of me. Daniel smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I love you." I sank onto the couch, letting the weight of everything wash over me. 15 years ago, I was a girl crying on a sidewalk because my mother told me to leave and not embarrass myself. Today, I was a woman with a family, a career, and a life that was mine, built from the ground up without any of them. Later that week, I logged into Facebook one last time. My post had tens of thousands of views, hundreds of comments, dozens of shares. People I didn't even know were arguing on my behalf, tearing apart Olivia's lies, calling out the cruelty, defending the girl I once was. I closed the app, blocked the last remaining relatives, and felt something inside me finally settle. Not revenge, not victory. Peace. A week later, I walked into a small art supply store and bought a set of brushes and paints. I had no idea what I was doing, no plan, no technique. I just knew I needed color, something gentle, something soft, something that belonged to me. Sometimes healing looks like a courtroom win. Sometimes it looks like public vindication. And sometimes it looks like a blank canvas. I went home, set up a small easel, sat alone in the sunlight, and painted.